the top just to let us all know. Or not. Yay. Good. Right, we're 2 thumbs up. So thank you so much for being here. I've got the ubiquitous PowerPoint as well, but it will sort of help prompt me. I tend to be a fairly, what's the word, sort of free flow and freestyle and in the moment kind of a person in terms of how I present and what I do. So this will just provide me with a few pointers in the background just to kind of anchor the chat and, of course, to watch the time a little bit. So I'll just get that going for us. Can everybody see that screen okay? Can we see the screen?
It's all good. Yeah,
yeah,
we can see.
Thank you.
The slides. We can see the slides on the side as well.
Oh, okay, all right. So I might actually, if everyone's okay, I might just leave it in that mode. Is that okay? Can everybody see that?
Yeah, all good.
Yep, all good.
Very good. Okay, here we go. So the topic of today's webinar is how to assess your stakeholders to enable high change adoption. And I'm sort of taking a bit of a riff from the book on how I'm going to present this. But first of all, just the protocols, I think we've pretty much covered most of them, but now mai haere mai, we say in the te reo in language in New Zealand, which just means welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. You can see I tend to be really interactive, so sorry it's a bit counterintuitive there. So I said sound and camera off, but periodically I will maybe ask things. But if you just, so you can be on, sound on as long as there's not noise, because I do like to have it interactive. We are recording it, as I've already said, and if we could have questions at the end, either via the chat or the audio, would be great. And so what we're doing today is basically channeling one of those key premises in my book, Change Management That Sticks. And that rolls from this underpinning idea that if change is all about people, which of course it is, we've got that classic triangle with people, process, tech, but we all know, you can have great tech, shiny boxes with blinking lights on desktops if it's IT. Great process flows maybe sitting around that, but if the people ain't interacting with the processes, actually adopting it and using the tech, then it's sort of all for naught, right? So we can tick the box and say it's live, but then there's the so what factor, because it's not been actually practically used and it's not enabling great outcomes. So all of this that I'm presenting to you rolls from this fundamental premise. If it's all about people, then we have to understand really fully in a very nuanced way, who are we delivering to and what do they want from what we're delivering to them. And so I did a little model in my book, and then as I looked at it, I realized there was quite a lot more to unpack around that. And it's all actually in some ways a bit of a challenge to the typical methodological direction of travel when we're assessing our stakeholders, because what I'm proposing is that we do not map our impacts to our stakeholders, because again, this is something that we usually traditionally do in most of the predominant methodologies, but that the stakeholders get mapped to the impacts. So we're doing a bit of an inversion. Okay, and then we, if you've read the book, you'll see this thing coming through again and again. We're underpinning how we relate them to those impacts according to the gain and the pain that they will attempt to move towards the gain, attempt to move from the pain in terms of motivating their adoption. Now, in all good webinars, there's a piece in the structure in which apparently you need to talk about credentials, so I won't bore you too long with this before we get into this idea of how do we actually inverse that, that sort of typical model of stakeholder assessment. So very briefly, I think, if you're here, probably you've sort of been following me on LinkedIn, maybe you've read the book, but very briefly, it slightly pains me whenever I say this, but who am I to be doing this? Well, I'm a change manager with 30 years delivery experience. So I actually started in 1990, which always scares me a bit when I say that, but there it is. I've done a lot of work in telcos, energy, financial services, actually quite a bit in health, which I need to update. I realise I sort of forgot that bit, but there's actually quite a lot of health in my resume. And most recently, over about the last 7 years, I've been doing a lot of large-scale transformation work in the public sector. There just seems to be, every time you turn around, at least in the New Zealand market, there's another large-scale transformation going on. And so I've assisted on a number of those in the change lead role across the program. So I guess in terms of point of difference, what I sort of like to sort of own in that space is that I learned on the job, in the trenches, at the coalface, and anything I understand about models or methodologies, it actually built up, again, a bit of an inversion. I was doing the work, I needed something, I maybe created a tool or was reading or whatever it might be, and I found something that worked, and that's always the key point for me in the moment for this particular situation, this particular change. Is it fit to purpose? Will it work? So I'm method agnostic. I actually don't have any of the big certifications in any of the sort of known methodologies, and I used to feel that that was a bit of a deficiency maybe about 10 years ago when certain methodologies became so hot right now and still are. And I've definitely worked in a lot of different houses so that are using whatever it might be, APNG or a ProSci, of course. But now I sort of see it as an advantage because, again, I'm always one that wants to understand the problem and then find the solution, not have a ready-made solution that we try to then fit and squeeze our particular circumstance into that. And then I guess finally, and again, this is just something I've put there, and I like to think it's true. I think I come from a long line, excuse me, of fairly rebellious thinkers. Thanks, Dad. So I like to think of myself as a bit of a rebel, a wild card, and a thinker of independent thoughts. And maybe there's some of that territory that you like to claim yourself, because I think there is something in the role of the change manager about needing to sit within, but also sit without simultaneously, and be able to think, excuse me, very dimensionally and laterally across the particular circumstances you see yourself within. And therefore, you need to be fairly independent in your thinking, and you need to be a critical thinker. So, okay, so now we're going to get into it. So this first slide is really, look, making a statement about how we typically do stakeholder assessment, and there's sort of the essential idea I'm proposing at the top. All stakeholders are not created equal, and yet we tend to actually assess them as if they are. And what I mean by that is we tend to approach our stakeholder assessments as a sort of a laundry list. It's a great big scrolling list. Usually it's hierarchical and functional. So we tend to, if it's in private sector, we're starting usually with the board. Maybe we've got the shareholders up there, the board, and then we go to the chief executive and downward. So there's a kind of a food chain assembly that we do. And then underneath those upper layers, we tend to go functionally. We go, well, here's all the finance people, here's all the customer service people, etc. And then we're basically creating a kind of one directional relationship between that list and the thing we're delivering, whatever it might be. And so, excuse me, I need a drink. So when we do this, we're treating our stakeholders a bit of a laundry list, and we're seeing them in the context of all sort of being equal and equivalent to each other. So if we take that idea and then we look at my model from the book, Change Management That Sticks, which is one of the predominant, again, pieces within the book. And what it's talking about, really, I'm sure some of you reading it picked up on this. It's moving from a kind of a linear list-oriented, dare I say, spreadsheet view of the way all the people in the change ecosystem interact, and moving it into a much more contextual, interactive framework. Okay, it's not a complex framework because, again, it's a firm belief of mine that as change managers, we are the custodians of turning the complex into the simple, because simple things are understood. When there's understanding, things get done. People will actually adopt what they can understand. So this isn't a tough model to get your head around, I don't think, but two interesting things I would like to observe with you about it. You are looking at the particular posture or orientation that the different stakeholders have towards the change. Are they a change initiator, i.e., are they probably a leader, somebody who's actually had a role in triggering that this piece of change gets introduced? And if they are, then they're kind of, if we look at prepositions on, above, around, under, they are above the change process. They may be a recipient, like they might be in the change process to an extent in terms of actually procedurally adopting what we're delivering. But a lot of the time, they've got more of a sort of a rolled up sort of dashboard view of what that change activity might be. Then, of course, we have our change partners, the vendors who are on the work, working with whoever else is in the process of developing the change to make sure we get into a really effective delivery cycle. And then, of course, we have the all-important change recipients. And then under that, we've got some categories in which we can demarcate those into users, consumers, customers, because there are some specific nuances in there in terms of those roles and how that will make them orient to what we're delivering. Having done quite a bit of commercial work, private sector work further back in my experience, the particular drivers of consumers when we may be delivering a souped up product, or I've done a lot of banking, so a financial services portal which is going to be available 24/7. There's a particular sort of orientation that they will have towards that change, because they are the customer and they very much see themselves in that light. And that might be a little bit different than how, say, a back office processing team who are also receiving a change, but they might perceive themselves slightly differently than that external consuming customer. And then, of course, we have the last but not least, we have all of our onlookers. Anyone who's ever worked on any change of any size will be aware that there are always a range of players around the periphery of what we are doing who are not directly impacted, but do have some kind of a vested interest in what's going on, sometimes benign, sometimes not so much, who can have a huge impact on the success of what we're delivering, on the adoption. And sometimes that can be quite overt, but a lot of the times the influence and impact of that group is actually quite covert. It sort of flies under the tide line, and we have to be, very mindful and attuned. The spidey senses need to be tingling about what those pieces are. So if I take my holistic WE model showing some sort of directional relationships between those at the top initiating and those in the process receiving, then we can start to turn it into this kind of a view, which is when we're starting to think a bit more relationally, about who is in this process, how are they playing, how are they oriented to what we're delivering, and what is therefore going to be paramount and forefront in their minds in terms of orienting to what we're actually doing, this thing in the middle, the thing we're delivering. And if we think of it more like this, rather than that scrolling hierarchical laundry list, then we are going to get a much finer appreciation for the dynamics between the flow of this activity. Okay, and so what I actually did, if you had time to look at that, I actually created a bit of a takeout. So I took this model and I turned it into something a little bit more pretty via Canva. Again, so it's something we can kind of just keep in our minds when we're first getting onto a piece of work and starting to suss out the change and what are the main relationships, who fits where in this model. And when we start to do that, we are beginning to feel around some of the edges of scope that relate to who is exercising, or is it exorcising, EXOR, and a expansion or compression upon other people in that change process. So you know, this thing about benign dynamics when somebody is actively supportive and encouraging of what's going on, and then the inverse of that when they're not. Which ones am I seeing where within that relational flow between my stakeholders? And so that's just here we go again, just another slide to kind of bring this idea home, and asking the question, where is the direction of that attention, that posture, or that face turn towards the change? Where is it going from and to, and what is the nature of it? Okay, so that's sort of the first little segment of the presentation today. I've got a little exercise for you now. If you manage to download or get hold of that relational model that I sent through, did you guys all manage to get hold of that? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, very good. All right. So now I'm going to get us into just a little exercise. So I hope that you've got something that you can apply this to. But what I'd like you to do is grab your relational model there and just have a go at plotting out your stakeholders in terms of where they sit. So you see, I gave you in that freebie, there's 2 pages. There's one just showing you what the model looks like, and there was a second one when I sort of basically squished everything out. So to give you an opportunity to write in and around and on and through all of the stakeholders that you have in your process. So is that sort of clear to everybody what we're about for this section? Silence reigns.
Yes.
Are you there? Oh, very good. Okay, cool. So I'm going to now I'm going to try my hand at playing a bit of music. I'm going to subject you to some of Barb's musical tastes here, but this is actually what I used when I was writing the book, which I just had on loop replay when I wrote the book, and so I thought it was appropriate to give you a little dose of Madonna Ray of Light. So I just give you a little bit of time to work on your model now and just to write in all those stakeholder relationships. Okay. Was that enough time?
Yep, great start. Fantastic.
Very good. Okay, lovely. Now, so sorry, I couldn't resist coming off there, so I'm just going to stop sharing. So I wanted to just come back on and ask you guys, how is that exercise for you? And was there anything that you discovered in that process of repositioning so you're looking more contextually around your stakeholders? Who's brave? Why, Susanna?
It was easier to think of it in this model, I think, Barb, than
Oh, that's
trying
good
to be
know.
lineal and quicker. I've just started a new job, so I have my colleague in the room with me who's been here for forever. So we're
Right.
just going through what I'm going to be working on, and that was really easy compared to the old way we would have done it, as you said, very hierarchical.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I do have some further insights because I mean, I'm not one for throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? There's, merit in the functional approach and the hierarchical. They have their uses. Obviously, if you've, excuse me, if you've got a very hierarchical organization that's very status conscious around that hierarchy, then you really do need to have to deeply understand all of those layers and levels. But this just gives you another dimension to play with, right, to add in that mix. And maybe for certain environments, it's more useful to see it in this relational context in terms of how they're playing against the change, and then to layer on those other dimensions next, rather than always going the other way or kind of missing this piece entirely.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So great. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. So let me just, now I have to whiz back into my PowerPoint here. So just give me a wee minute there so that we get that back going. Here we go. Great. So let's carry on the journey then. So the next thing I wanted to do is, of course, then just talk about this notion of, if we're seeing it now in terms of the direction, then the next layer is to understand what is the nature of the attention that they're bringing to bear in terms of where their attention is facing. I couldn't resist pulling that eye of Sauron for the baleful influence, and then these fluffy teds for the supportive. And then, of course, we get into something more complex when, you know, I'm sure we've all had the experience if we've been on a few tours of duty as a change manager of somebody is presenting overtly as being supportive, but is actually undermining at the covert level. So there's a kind of some sabotaging behaviours going on, and we need to think that through that carefully, and that's really the next layer. So again, when we've got the sense of that direction, then we can start to understand about, well, what's driving. That's the direction of the attention. Now, what is the nature of the attention and what's driving it? What is the trigger that has created this particular orientation in the model? And so the next piece we would want to do is to then ask ourselves, when it comes to this change, what is it that this particular stakeholder is going to believe, think, feel, and therefore do in relationship to the change, at least until we can actually plan out our interventions and start to hopefully influence what these postures are in terms of their raw state when we first get onto the assignment. So just in terms of time, there's quite a bit here that we could be unpacking, but you know, I don't have time to sort of work through all of these pieces, but this is where I would be going next if I did that relational assessment of my stakeholders, and then I would be looking at each of those groups and I would be plotting out each of these particular columns and asking myself, because they believe this, what is it they're thinking about what we're doing, what are they feeling, and therefore what are they doing? And then which of those pieces do I want to change and which pieces do I want to actually amplify, because hopefully some really good stuff in there, depending on, you know, what sort of a change you're delivering. Some are more palatable than others without needing to do too much intervention, as no doubt we've all experienced. But, you know, I talk in the book, I've worked on quite a few regulatory compliance pieces, which, let's face it, nobody really wants them. I refer to them in the book as Project Cat Food. But you know what? They have to be there because they mean you get to keep the lights on the doors open. And there's a compelling proposition right there. So that lies behind it. So next thing I just wanted to talk about a little bit is, again, back to that laundry list of stakeholders. We tend to, as I said, look at internally, we'll go for functional grouping, and we might, you know, maybe we go HR, maybe we break that out and we go, you know, the REM team, the payroll team, the business consultants, you know, assist function that deals with all the HR issues. But we usually stop at that level. And what we don't do is, again, subdivide in terms of how are they attitudinally grouped within those functions. So there's an example I give in the book when I talk about a very large scale piece of transformation that was done that had this massive grouping of people, external customers who were recipients of the change. And basically they were all created equal. They were all described as the people who will pay government fees, and they were all lumped into one really enormous group. But the thing about that was that there was actually a really key point of differentiation within there, and that was to distinguish those people who need to pay those fees direct, and those who are big enough, probably usually a company, who are going to use an agent to actually manage and facilitate the paying of those fees. And because that group wasn't split out at that sub-level, and no learning materials or the why piece wasn't customized to meet their particular orientation to how they worked, because of course within the paying of fees they were kind of in that partner vendor piece, because they saw the paying of the fees as a really great thing because it let them create a business proposition off it. So again, the orientation is different, and what they want to know about the change and how they want to feel good about it is going to be very different than those people who are going, oh god, gosh, I don't want to pay this money, but I have to. So again, the kind of emotional resonance of how they relate to the change is completely different. And what are the key questions in their minds? Okay, you're changing the way how this paying of fees is done. How can you help me to help my customers to make this new way of approaching paying these fees as frictionless as possible, as smooth, and seamless as possible? And what tools are you giving me to help me position this to my clients in a way that will enable me to get them across the line in terms of making this transition? So those agents actually could have been really, really powerful advocates, but they're actually missed in that process and not being split out, and the particularities of what would actually motivate them to become a champion for this change was completely missed. So again, just talking about, even when we get to, the laundry list level, and we've got this group, say it's HR, then we really want to look at that in a lot more nuance in terms of, well, who can we split out of it, because the thoughts they are thinking about this change have a point of difference. And so what I'm getting at there is, if we haven't done this analysis, then we can bypass the motivations and demotivations to adopt. And so there's another layer there besides that functional and hierarchical grouping. And so the question that's always in my mind when I'm approaching this is that I'm asking, maybe I've got this group and they're functioning all together. Let's go somewhere else. So let's say that they are the provisioning team in a telecommunications organisation, which tend to be quite large organisations. And I might be going, right, all the people who do provisioning, I've got them all grouped up together. But what I need to ask myself is, who might feel completely differently about this change? And why might they feel different? And what does that difference mean that they will do differently when it comes to adoption? Okay. And so then we can sort of pick up the maybe at first glance quite sort of contrarian or counter impulses towards or away from adoption that there might be that we're not aware of if we don't ask these questions and we don't keep asking them ongoing throughout the process. Because as we know, talked about this a lot on my blogs, all change is emergent and the variables are always flexing and changing. And so we need to be really, again, attuned to that, which means that we constantly need to be flexing and unfolding in terms of our approaches to meet the need, because the need is constantly changing. And so I like this little GIF with the basketballer doing a great pivot there. So there's this thing that we're constantly doing. It's kind of like, when IT systems go back to the server and sort of check for new data all the time. So when I'm working on assignment, I'm kind of constantly following that process of checking and revalidating what I thought is still correct. Is the stakeholder in the same place? Are they still thinking the same way they were a month ago about this? Or has there been some kind of significant pivot point? And why is that? What is that about? And is that something positive that I can use to influence and enable other people in their adoption, or is it actually moving the other way? So that's the other key piece there. We need to be asking ourselves, what is the movement towards adoption that this change in attitude is raising? And then I just some other thoughts about stakeholders that I thought was worth putting in here. So I've worked on a few fairly, at least in the New Zealand context, quite significant pieces of late. And one of them was working across the entire ecosystem for work safety. And so that ecosystem, and there's a number of them around. I've also worked on the vocational educational sector piece as well lately. And so there's back to this idea of hierarchies and layers. So within that ecosystem of work safety, there are very, very many layers, starting from the government right down to the employees, right? The people that we're trying to ensure the safety of, the employees, and then through many, many myriad of layers, which if you've ever worked on one of these pieces, is one of the significant challenges, because depending on who it is that has hired us, we are often many layers away from the true point of intersection when we can guarantee high adoption, because we have got the right change agents transacting on the ground to deliver that change. And so in terms of this example I've given here, I've just shown you how this flow of activity looks. And what we found for the particular thing that we were working on for this initiative was that the most effective point of intersection we had was the on the ground intermediaries, okay, which was people like occupational therapists and nurses who were going into the workplaces were known. They already had the trust and confidence. They had some technical background. Vocationally, they were dedicated to the pursuit of work safety, or else they wouldn't have had the roles they did. And so they were basically already in the tent and wanting to support and enable an improvement of outcome for work safety. And so, I guess, again, thinking about pivots, when we first got into that piece of work, we were working probably quite hard about level 3 and 4. We were the level 2, the ministry, and then we were working quite hard at level 3 and 4, but we weren't getting much traction. And then again, we looked at that really hard. We did some end user focus groups and surveys, and we worked out, you know what? We're putting all the time and attention at the wrong level, and we need to change that. We need to actually get closer to the coalface. When you think about it, it seems like a no-brainer, right? In terms of where we can be most effective in terms of delivering this change. And so we got to the point that we had all these tools for occupational therapists, as I said, and nurses and other agents who went into the workplace who could, actually deliver, great conversations, give the why on the ground, do it directly, have an immediacy about demonstrating things in the workplace and why these new changes and suggestions would actually work and make a difference, and deliver all the collateral that went along with it. So that's just a piece for anyone who is working on really large scale pieces, when you've got multi-layers that you're needing to get through in order to get that adoption. And so, of course, back to sort of another fundamental premise in the book, but once you've got through the pieces I've talked about so far, you've got that direction, you've thought about what they believe, think, feel, and therefore will do, then you want to ask yourself about gain to adopt and the movement away from pain, because sometimes that can be even more powerful than what we think we're going to get out of. It's about mitigating what we think we don't want will actually propel us towards something. And the book has quite a lot of insights relating to this notion, which I actually heard after I'd written the book, but before it was published, that notion is actually called the SCARF model. So then you want to actually do a piece in which you template out, well, what is the specific gain that stakeholder will get, and what is the pain that they are trying to avoid? And then the next piece in that stage would be to say to yourself, and where is the current movement? So what is the current state relative to where you are? Maybe you're 3 months into the initiative and you're delivering at the 9-month mark. Where are they at the moment? Are they moving in a positive direction or a negative in terms of adoption? And what is it about? What are the forces that are propelling them there? And again, just a bit of a slightly blurry screenshot reference back to the book, which actually goes to the next layer, because after I'd been working as a change manager, I guess about 12, 13 years, I realized that there are very predictable patterns around this gain and pain for each of your key stakeholder groups. And I just found myself writing, strap lines for benefits and outcomes that constantly were talking about, this will be faster, that will be this will be cheaper for the customer, etc. More available, easier, faster, more product, more accessible, whatever it might be. And so in the book, I went through and actually customized those lists and made them as niche specific to those different roles in my stakeholder model. What is the gain and pain that usually relates to being a chief executive? What is the gain and pain that usually relates to being a partner, vendor on a piece of work? So all of that is really, again, fundamental premise of the book, that change managers are in the business of setting up offers. They want to set up offers that are compelling enough that people will choose change, because the impulse to adopt comes from the individual. Sure, we're setting up a whole lot of incentives for the adoption. And when I say incentives, don't get me wrong, some of that is about stick as much as it's about carrot. But the impulse to adopt or not always comes from the individual. It is a choice. And so that is the fundamental that we're trying to get to, and that is the point of doing that piece of relational stakeholder assessment, because I think it gives you a lot of clues and cues in terms of what those particular stakeholders do want from the change. And then just looking at the time, I have a piece coming up in which I have my own piece of offer as rolls off webinar interactions quite often. But before I get into that, I just wanted to just come out of the sharing mode and just ask how that was for you, and did any thoughts occur, or did that sort of spark any curious questions from anyone that's on the webinar? Do I need the ray of light in the background? What have we got in the chat? Anything?
Hey Barb, it's Jenny here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well. Hello, Jenny. I didn't know you were on the call.
Hi, I couldn't miss seeing you and
Oh, bless
participating in
you.
this.
Bless
Lovely to
you.
see you.
Hi.
Here's one of my interesting questions, because I haven't used your approach to stakeholder mapping before.
Right.
I did a little piece on it, but I'm working on now while I was sitting here.
Mm.
And what I noticed is that many people are in some of our stakeholders are in the same groups.
Yes.
In different, yeah, that they're repeating. I'm not really saying that. So they're
Yes.
sitting
Yes.
in different layers.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
that what you?
Well, I think that's fascinating, and that's going to happen, Jenny. And I think that's all to the good, because the question in my mind would then be
Spaces.
Oh, sorry, you cut out for a minute there. What was that, Jenny?
So what? Yeah, I did. I noticed that. So the rest of the assessment that you've just taken us through, what's your advice on how to navigate that when one stakeholder might be both a partner and a recipient, for example?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And that is going to happen. And it's
Yeah.
great that you've picked them up, because again, you're thinking more dimensionally and an awareness that they sit in multiple categories, right? And so what I would do, even though there's some complexity to it because you have them repeated and you can distill it down, right? But you want to look at what is the believe, think, feel, do relating to each of the roles. And then you want to understand what are the gaps and the similarities in those postures given those different roles. Because it may be, I would say, I mean, that's a great question, Jenny, because it's going to, when people are wearing multiple hats against a change, and some of our, say if they're sitting at GM or next layer, like they're a tier sort of 2 to 4 or 5, right? They might be in the position you're talking about, and depending on their position, their belief, thought, structure, what they want to get out of it, what they don't, and the differences, that might actually get them into a bit of a push-pull bind. And if you can work through that and understand that, then there's room to coach and influence and enable them, and maybe to give them an objective awareness of those particular tensions that they're wrestling with in themselves, but maybe not even conscious of it. I hope that was helpful, Jenny. You look frozen on my end. So thank you very much for your question. So look, Emma's asked me, great, what's your advice on measuring adoption, both coming up with the criteria and tracking so that we are clear that it's heading in the right direction? Okay, so really good question, measuring adoption. Well, the book goes into that in quite a bit of detail, but I guess what I would say is you want to be clear about the 2 layers to it. So there's the widgets layer of measurement, where this many people come to the learning, where this many people pass, etc. We had this many clicks on the website, which had all the procedural activity. But then what you want to make sure that you've done is worked out overall what are the outcomes that we are trying to achieve, and then you need to actually have very specific measures against those outcomes. So if I look at that work safety model that I gave, then obviously you're looking for a decrease in fatalities and serious injuries, within the workplace ecosystem in New Zealand out of what we were trying to do. And then you can actually put, there's very specific measures against that, right? So it's going to take some time, but you want to see a tick down and you want to maybe set targets against that. So I hope that was really helpful, and just aware of time. So for those who might have an interest, I do have a little bit to do around my first digital course. And so I have created a course picking up on this material and quite a bit more that I've been working on ever since I got the book out. And I'll put this into the chat for you if I can actually manage to not do what I just did there. And are you still with me, people? So are you still looking at the presentation, guys?
Yep, we can still
Yes.
see it.
Yep.
Oh, you are.
Yep.
Sorry. This is me
Yeah.
learning to
Presentation
work.
still.
Good, thank you. So I just put this into the chat. Come back in here. There we go. And so what I'm proposing to do is to work with you guys in a course which I'm entitled Self-Change with Confidence. And it's designed to be, as I hope all my stuff is, a very practical course in which I want to work with you to basically go further beyond what I'm talking about with this relational model and teach you a bunch of new stuff. And so what I want to cover with that course is how to develop and sell engagement activities that will really ignite adoption. And it's pitched off that relational model, so you're understanding where they're coming from and why they're orienting to the change in that way. Therefore, what's going to help them to really step up in terms of adoption. How do you tailor interventions to mitigate your specific stakeholder objections, which will also roll off this analysis. The key point of the learning will be about how to build a transformation ladder for each stakeholder group to motivate the adoption. And then the all-important, how do you actually phase and sequence a change adoption journey once you understand all of those elements, because timing is everything, and we have to be very careful about too much on the accelerator and not enough on the clutch at the right time, and we can actually miss the mark in terms of promoting that adoption and getting the result we want. And so here I am with my no ginso steak knives, but the way I'm going to do this piece is I'm going to teach it in 3 phases. And so I've priced this course for the first intake at $99. And out of that, you will get a live course experience with me, which will be on Thursday, the 6th of July from 1 to 2 p.m. With a follow-up live coaching call, and we'll see how we go. And this is my first digital product, but I'm really hoping that if we have the coaching call, then you guys can get really customized help and ask very specific questions, and we can work on things within that format. And from those 2 live events, I'll then be packaging up a live digital course offering, and you will be able to get access to that product for life and all of the related tools and materials that come out of it. And so there's the link down the bottom, hopefully in the chat, Self-Change with Confidence course. There's a landing page you'll be taken to, which will give you all the deets about it and more insights into what it's all about. And what is it about in terms of what are you getting from purchasing this? The course curriculum, I will ensure, is very comprehensive. I've been building e-learning packages in the corporate space for 30 years. I'm aiming to add a lot of value, and because it's my first group, I'm really wanting to do a fabulous job and give you guys really individual attention. Expert led, that's me talking about me, but the 30 years proven track record, I hope, to speak for itself. It'll be extremely practical, and it will have interactive learning materials, and of course it will be self-paced. Okay, and there'll be bonuses, right? This is the thing. It's an opportunity to add more value and really, I hope, equip you guys to do what you do well and have great tools to help you do it with this, again, this frictionless experience for you is much low fuss and low stress. How do I actually handle this piece? How do I frame it up? Trying to give you as many practical tools as possible to assist you. So the bonuses are a 3-page business readiness checklist. There's the first page of it there, something to really help you streamline the thinking that needs to lie behind spinning up your business readiness assessments. I'm also doing an interactive lean canvas that you can use in workshops when you're doing change impact assessments. And I'll design it so it's something they can use when you've actually got people in the room and you've got people remote. You know, you're just doing those hybrid change impact workshops, which we so often end up doing now. And then the third piece is that I've actually been working for some months on a planner, which is leveraging content out of the book. It's an A4, pretty decent, chunky planner with change impact categories on each page and some other goodies and quotes and the cartoons from the book. And so I will be launching that very soon on Amazon, and there'll be a very, very low early buy discount that you will be offered for joining up in my first cohort of digital course participants. So that is actually what I wanted to cover with you today. I wonder if you have any questions. Has anybody got anything I'd like to ask me about that? Silence reign. Still people on the call. Oh, look at this. Right, okay, so if you're not going to be there, here's the good thing. So if you can't come to the events, then they will be recorded and there will be replays available. And from those 2 live experiences, and I'm doing this way because I'd rather do it interactively and understand what really is on your mind, is why I've set it up this way, then I will take that content and I will package it into a course. The course will be several hours of material. It will have all of the learning materials and you can use that course ongoing. So, you know, it's obviously a bonus if you can work with me live in those 2 sessions, but if you don't, you're still getting an enormous amount of value from receiving the course, and you will benefit from the customization of that course based on what has happened in the live parts. Oh, look at this. Oh, Hene wants to come along. That makes me so happy. Thank you so much. Just signed up for the course. Thanks for a great session, Barb. Oh, look, I really do appreciate that. Thank you. Do I have a course for people who is looking into or will be transitioning to change management? What a marvelous question. Beyonce, I don't, but that might be something that you might want to talk to me about, some individual mentoring sessions. That's usually the way I'm working with new people wanting to come into the field. And it means that I can do really sort of individualized help. How am I doing with questions? I will be signing up, Jodie. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yes, price point wise, I don't know if we had one. Was it Brian was in the States? So I worked it out this morning. If you're in America, it's $61 for the whole thing at US. So good for you. And so, any other questions coming through? I do appreciate all your good bargain. Thanks, Kate. Instant discount. Yeah, isn't that good? So, yeah, I did think about pricing in US dollars, but no, I thought let's go with the local price for a lot of my local peeps. How much is my mentoring? If you email me, I will talk to you about that. I must admit that up to now, I've been doing it as a corporate package, but if it's the individual wanting to pay, I want to create a lower price point. So I am prepared to be quite flexible about that and basically understand, you know, where you're at and price it accordingly, because I really love doing the mentoring work and it's so much more effective when it's one-on-one. So yeah, if you're interested in the mentoring piece, marvelous, get in touch with me and we can talk about what's going to work for you and set the price point against that. You know, I'm happy. Some people, I see them for an hour each week. Other people buy a package, which means they get 2 hours with me. on a call, and then there's 1 to 2 hours of homework a week, and that package is $1,500. But if you just want to do one session with me and then leave it for a month and then come back, then we can definitely talk about that. Okay, so just aware of the time, like to finish on time. So I'm just going to go back. I thought it might actually give you guys a laugh if you see this as well. Seeing this as a new venture for me. So if I go back to questions, I've got this one slide that follows, but just to remind Barb to turn off the recording, which when I did a test with lovely Kate from NZ out of office, I actually forgot to do. So I kept recording on Teams for 3 hours and then wiped the call, the whole recording. So I must remember to turn it off. And besides that, just looking at the time, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me, Ngā mihi nui. It was great to have you there, and for the interaction and the comments in the chat. It really does help you to bring it to life and, you know, avoid that feeling that we can sometimes get when we're just out there in this virtual wonderland vacuum, wondering if we're actually intersecting with anybody. So I do appreciate the interactions with you all. Thank you so much for being here. I just have a picture here of the first page from the business readiness freebie that you'll be getting. 3 pages to help you brainstorm how the flow of your business readiness activity will go, sample questions and other things that you can actually use to really create a really great either online survey or pulse work, you know, pulse focus group work with people. And accepting that, I'm going to stop sharing. We've got 2 minutes to go. Really appreciate you all being here. Hope you got something out of it, and you know, just great to have you all attend. Great session, thank you. Love the simple approach. Definitely use it. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really do appreciate you all being here. I will hang on just for the remaining couple of minutes, just in case there's anything that anybody wants to ask me. Oh, there's Rosie. Lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. Mā te wā to those who are leaving. Kia ora, Brian. Thank you so much for being here. The dwindling numbers. If you have any questions about the course offering, then please, of course, do email me and I'll be right back to you as soon as I can. And thank you for your interest. Mā te wā, everyone. Down to 4 on the call. Enjoy your lunch. I'm looking forward to mine.